Yeah. Oh, look who woke up. Sir, you were just in a bad car accident in December 3rd of 2023. You're actually just now waking up. It's been over 9 months.
Oh, man. So I missed the Seminoles playing in the playoffs?
Well, looks here, you guys actually didn't make it to the playoffs.
What? We were undefeated.
Well, a lot of people were surprised. It was actually quite the controversy. You did get to go to the Orange Bowl to play Georgia, though.
Whatever. Did we at least win that game?
Yeah, unfortunately, the people in the Challenger explosion were a little bit closer to surviving than you guys were to winning that game. The final score was 63-3.
Oh my God, we got TCU'd?
Yeah, you got TCU'd.
Well, at least that's behind us now. At least we're probably kicking some butt this season and playing with a vengeance.
Sir, you might want to sit down for this one.
What do you mean? I am sitting down.
You might want to sit a little further down.
What the fuck?
But before we begin, if you want to get in on the action, you can with Underdog, the easiest place to play fantasy sports. And if you sign up with my promo code today, you're not just getting the best fantasy sport experience, but helping your favorite football YouTube channel out. Using that code will also get you a free pick, plus you can get a deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash. And what better way to use that cash than on Pick'em, where you pick whether your favorite players will have a higher or lower stat total in this week's game for a chance to win big. Yes, it's just that easy, and you could win up to 1,000 times your money in a single night. And if that wasn't sweet enough, if you sign up today, you're gonna get a free CD Lamb pick. I mean, what more could you ask for? And I just love how easy it is to use Underdog's app. So don't punt on a good time. Click the link in the description and come play today on Underdog. Now, even if you weren't in a car accident just waking up from a coma, the FSU collapse still probably feels just about as jarring. But how did we get here, and what happened to bring this on? Well, I'm glad you asked, because it all started with the Jordan Travis injury. As much as I think many FSU fans don't want to admit it, as much as I didn't want to admit it, this dominant appearing team for 12 straight games would come out against Louisville and look mortal. Not just mortal, dare I say human? Yes, their defense played lights out, but they literally didn't even make it to the 50-yard line until 12 minutes into the game, when the ball was literally given to them at the 50-yard line. On top of that, they didn't really have that many good drives that entire game, as their one touchdown came off of a 73-yard run by Toafili, and their 2 field goal drives were for a total of 84 offensive yards. Overall, their little over 200 yards of offense, thanks to the lack of Jordan Travis, is what caused them to be knocked out of the playoff race. Then, of course, I think we were all aware of what happened when they played against Georgia. In an act of defiance, they had one of the most sit-outs we've ever seen by key players in a bowl game. Mix that in with the fact that Georgia felt like they also got snubbed, but instead wanted to prove why they should have actually been allowed in the playoffs, and calling it a recipe for disaster would be like calling a cake where you place the flour with cyanide powder a recipe for a tummy ache. Like, yeah, but that's a bit of an understatement. So, they get the brakes beaten off them like they were caught stealing in the Middle Ages, and it was on to the offseason where they would literally have 50 of their 123-man roster leave. Now, whether they were transferring out or entering the draft, most notable of them was, of course, being their quarterback Jordan Travis, as well as 8 other players getting drafted like Jared Verse, Braden Frisk, Renardo Green, Jerrion Jones, Tatum Bethune, all leaving on the defensive side of the ball, Keon Coleman, Trey Benson, Johnny Wilson, and Jaheim Bell, all leaving on the offensive side of the ball. So, to say the least, this team, who already had questions about their depth, was now going to have to heavily refuel, and they tried to do that in the transfer portal. They brought in 15 different sort of starred recruits for the portal, with the biggest name among them being DJ Uyunglele, former Clemson and Oregon State quarterback, and he had a lot of promise. All he had ever done was be a part of winning programs. His first year at Clemson, he would finish 10-3, and sure, he had no games above 250 yards of passing and a great defense to back him up, but those numbers would be dwarfed in year 2, when he would increase above all expectations to have exactly 1 game above 250 yards of passing. But for what it's worth, it was well above that, as he threw all over the renowned school known as Wake Forest for 371 yards, even though Wake would later get completely exposed for having a horrendous defense. But against South Carolina, DJ would complete 8 of 29 passes for 99 yards and a 26 quarterback rating. So Florida State saw that and was like, hey, if he ever enters a transfer portal twice, we need more of that around here. As DJ would get benched after that game and take his talents to Oregon, getting better every year, this time having 3 games of over 250 passing yards. When he would put his name in the portal, FSU was pretty much forced to grab the man who was formerly ranked higher than CJ Stroud. So now with a younger roster, a quarterback who has thrown for less than 250 yards in his entire career than Travis did last season, and a dream, they would enter the season ranked number 10 in the country. Surely not overhyped at all. But luckily, their schedule opened up with quite the cakewalk to ease them into the season. You had Georgia Tech, a team who was always pretty mid and hasn't been a real force to be reckoned with since 2014, which was the last time they had 2 multiple top 25 wins, where ironically they lost the ACC championship game to, guess who? Florida State. You followed that up by Boston College, who was a surprisingly solid ACC team last year, but still perceived as a bottom-dwelling lower half of the ACC team. And then you had Memphis, a group of 5 school that Florida was literally paying $1.3 million to come in and play them, which should tell you everything you need to know about how that matchup was perceived. So as it opened against Georgia Tech in Ireland, we would immediately see some problems. Yes, the first drive looked good for FSU, as they relied heavily on their ground game to pick up the first 8 points as they sent a strong message going for 2. Georgia Tech would immediately respond though, as they would drive back down the field and score their own touchdown before actually stopping the Florida State offense on the ensuing drive. They would punt it back and forth and would actually hold Florida to 2 incredibly long field goals of 52 and 59 yards to match the second touchdown by Georgia Tech, as this number 10 ranked team seemed to have an awful lot of parity with this unranked Yellow Jackets team. And while many hoped for a better second half from Florida State, it just didn't come. Tech would miss a field goal while FSU would exchange punts before finally exchanging a couple of touchdowns and giving Georgia Tech the football back with 6 minutes on the clock, where they would perfectly execute a game-ending drive using every single second on that clock to get into field goal range and ice it. Now, there was a lot to digest from this. It was a back-breaking field goal loss. Their special teams looked pretty good and pretty much kept them in this one, but their defense didn't really do a great job at stopping what should have been an inferior offense, and their offense sure as hell did not look good against this defense, as despite putting up 3 touchdowns, showed little in the way of exciting plays that would make you think that this game was some sort of a fluke, unless Georgia Tech would turn out to have an incredible defense. And retrospectively, seeing how they lost to Syracuse, who put up 31 points on them, that is most certainly not the case. But still, without this hindsight, people would laugh at them for the embarrassing loss. Maybe some would be worried about the long-term implications of this game, but I think the alarms weren't really going off yet. That would change the following week when they would take on Boston College. The game would open with a pair of punts. Notably, Florida State's was a 3-and-out, but then Boston College would get the ball on the 29-yard line and begin their drive. 14 plays and 9 minutes later, Boston College held a 7-point lead. And how did the Seminoles respond? Another 3-and-out. Boston College would score again. Florida State would go 3-and-out. An errant snap would give Florida State the ball within field goal range, and this would be how they get their first 3 points. It was looking miserable, as another punt to field goal combination had them going into half down 14-6. And now people were beginning to sound the alarms, as they looked even worse in the second half. DJ opened up with a pick turn touchdown before going 3-and-out, and finally midway through the third, he would look competent on 3 big plays, passing for 63 yards and a touchdown on that drive. That makes you see why they thought so highly of him to begin with. But the back half of this game from DJ is what would draw the most questions. Some of his throws were just horrific. A big penalty in their final drive forced them to punt, and then we'd get to see the flaws on the defensive side of the ball as well. For the second week in a row, with over 6 minutes left in the game, a team was able to run out the entire clock in a single drive. FSU now was off to a historically bad start, and since their first game was week 0, it meant that rankings hadn't been updated, so they were now an 0-2 number 10 ranked team, wearing that rank like a tar and feathering, cementing their humiliation. But with all of that, now coming into their home would be unranked Memphis, and Florida State paid them good money to be there, and they would be damned if they didn't show up and show out. 2 plays into this game and Florida State fumbled it away to Memphis. You knew it was going to be a rough one. They held on firm, allowing for only a field goal, but their second drive went backwards with them punting at 4th and 13, and they would slowly chip away the field position battle with the punting game until, after starting on their 27-yard line, 3 plays would happen and DJ would throw the interception. At this point, the game literally could not go worse if they wanted it to. 8 plays later, Memphis scores, bringing it to a 10-0 game. Before the ensuing drive, they would barely sneak into field goal range for Ryan Fitzgerald just to put them on board. Now, when I said their special teams was good, I was mainly talking about their specialists. They would fumble a punt return to give Memphis a heartbreaking field goal at the end of the half, and Memphis would get the ball back and immediately score to start the second half. But little did we know that that would all but end it. Memphis was actually doing everything in their power to keep Florida State in the game. They threw a pick, they let Florida get to a 1st and goal from the 2-yard line where DJ would literally miss on a wide open touchdown to the dismay of all and be forced to settle on a field goal where, once again, Memphis keeps them in it by missing a field goal of their own to give the Seminoles a chance to get back in. But unfortunately, 2 sacks meant that Florida State really had no choice but to punt, facing down a 4th and 32, and although Memphis would once again give them the ball back with 40 seconds on the clock, the game-ending Hail Mary attempt was broken up. The Seminoles fell to 0-3 for the first time in program history, and at this point, whether they win some games this season or not, this is rock bottom, especially now as if they're going to have to go on and face down some real teams in their schedule. But the debacle with Georgia, leading to the mass exodus and DJ being a bust of a transfer, is how Florida State ended up with the biggest implosion in college football history.